This is the second half of my epic interview with Miss Rebecca Heineman, one of the founders of Interplay. If you haven't seen the first half, it'll be down in the description below. Let's continue our discussion. Yeah, and we talked about Bard's Tale 3, but there are many other games. You had hands in a shit ton of games, but Mind Shadow, Borrowed Time, Task
Oh, those are
Times,
big
and
ones. I created those games. Mind Shadow,
Toontown.
Tracer Sanction, Borrowed Time, Times, and Total. I created them. I mean, I'm actually the creator.
So what was the design process for that? Is it just the same thing that you always loved doing, or did you want to
Oh,
be ambitious in some way?
I've always loved Wizard and the Princess. I love Mission Asteroid. These are Sierra games that predated Interplay and Boom. I've always wanted to do that better, which is the reason why I went with Bard's Tale, because I like wizardry and I wanted to do wizardry better. But before I did the wizardry clone, i.e., Bard's Tale, I did a Wizard the Princess clone called the Advent Engine, which allowed you to do you type in 2 words and so forth, and it had basically the entire structure was, hey, if I was to write a Sierra style text adventure game, this is the engine I write for. So I created the engine, created a scripting language, created all that stuff, and then we put together a scenario. The first one was supposed to be based on the Bourne Conspiracy. And the second one was supposed to be kind of like a space romp, Flash Gordon-ish thing. We were all even trying to license The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. But in those cases, none of the deals went through. But Tracer Sanction was original title and original storyline. But with Mind Shadow, if you play it, it really does feel like the Bourne Conspiracy, the original Bourne book, because you start off on a desert island with no memory what is going on, but as time goes on, you find you have all these skills, and you find that you're a survivalist, but you don't know why. And then when you finally find the person who tried to murder you, you then take back your original your old life and so forth. Now, of course, there were things changed, like you're not a spy, you're a billionaire or something like that. And somebody tried to knock you off so you can go ahead and steal all your money. The typical, sibling rivalry thing. Because, there were things we couldn't do, but it was intended to be a full franchise, because we even had this character called the Condor in the game, in which every time you needed help, you type in help Condor. And then the Condor would appear and give you a hint. And the whole idea was that this was supposed to be a recurring character in all these text adventure games that we were playing. Because, remember, Sierra had about 8 or 9 text adventures until they ended with Time Zone, and then they went to the 2.5D game, which is like King's Quest afterwards. So they stopped with that particular franchise and start with a new one. Well, we were doing the Kingdom Time Zone Wizard and Princess type of franchise. We had these characters in there, and we wanted to build the franchise. But after Tracer Sanction Mind Shadow came out, no one cared about the Condor, so that idea was killed. So when we did Borrowed Time, Condor was not there at all. And of course, Borrowed Time was, I realized that people like point and click with mice, so I changed the game engine so it wasn't just you typing in 2 words and there's graphics. Now you have a mouse clicking. And then when we did Task Times in Toontown, music was added, and it was really, really good. But after Task Times Toontown came out, the King's Quest came out, and it basically meant that either we were going to do King's Quest like games, or in my case, I focus now on Bard's Tale games. Because, if we didn't have Bard's Tale and so forth, I probably would have done our own King's Quest like engine, modified my engine to be more King's Quest like, and we would have put out games in that particular genre instead.
That would have been interesting. That, I guess, in some ways, y'all would have, if you would have done that, would have probably been, because there was a,
yeah, it eventually morphed into Telltale games,
basically. But I mean, that up until LucasArts was making point and click games, y'all probably would have been like the sole competitor that had an established name. That would have been so interesting to check out. I have a question about.
Yeah.
I have a question about how text parsers work, right? So, little backstory. I was playing games from many different companies. A lot of those companies had text-based adventure games dating back to the Dragon 32 and the Commodore 64. This weird French computer, Oli or something. But the way that it worked, I looked into the coding for it. The way that it worked is that the first verb would be read, and then you could type in whatever, noun that you wanted, but the parser was only reading the first four characters, at least for those games. Did you expand on that principle by letting the whole second word being, interpreted by the
Well,
interpreter?
I tokenized the sentence coming in. And the way it would work is, first off, you had to spell correctly because there was no spell checking of any kind. So if you mistyped, the game would be not forgiving at all. But what it did is things like, first, I would remove all prepositions. So such as like the, a, it, words like that. If you type those in, I get rid of them. So I just reduce your sentence to, jump on the lake becomes jump lake. So that's the first pass. I reduce it down to just the verb noun. Now you can do and in as things. So basically what it internally changes it to is get rope and block, or get rope and hammer. That's, you type that in. It's like get rope and hammer. I turned it into get rope, get hammer. And that's what I feed the engine. Because I saw the word and, so I go back to the verb, then I make a new sentence or new command, which is get whatever it is, and that's how I feed it. Also, I supported the word it, which basically is whatever was the last noun I processed. So you'd say get hammer and use it is a valid sentence, because I would say get hammer, all right, and means that there's another command. If it's a and if you say it, well, then what you're doing is saying get hammer, get hammer. But if you say get hammer and then use, like, oh, it's a verb. Now it's a new command. In this case, I just stop parsing, process it, and then go to get and then use it. And it says it. What is it? What was the last noun I used? That's the thing. Use that. So there was a lot of smoke and mirrors because people thought that the parser was a lot more advanced, like Eliza, because it really supported what appeared to be natural language. But I just simply used a few heuristics, very simple heuristics, but it covered like 95% of the cases of you typing in a natural sentence. And it then understood what you said and did what it did. And people were amazed. And I was like, suckers, if you only knew how much, like, don't look at the person behind the curtain stuff I was doing. But, when you're doing this on a 48K Apple II, you had to do smoke and mirrors. You only get the game to fit in memory. And internally, what it did was that the scripting language tokenized all the verbs and nouns into numbers. So I only stored one value for every verb and one value for every noun. But then I had a dictionary that said if you typed in use, it's command 4. If you typed in get, it's command 1. If you typed in look, it's command 2. Then the scripting, when you compile it, turns it into 1, 7. What's the 1? Look. What's 7? Hammer. So if you ever type in look hammer, I have a match. Here's the script that handles that. And the way it was organized was that there were 2 levels of scripting. One is scripting that occurs in every room of the game. So no matter where you are in the game, if you typed in this is the response it would give you. Otherwise, there were scripts that were assigned to rooms. So the first thing it did is when you type in your words, I would then say, okay, you want to get hammer. First off, what room are you in? All right, is there a script in this room? The special cases just for this room? And the answer is yes. There's a script here. All right, is there a get hammer script? It says yes. Okay, what's the script say? Do you already have the hammer? No. Okay, then print the same thing. You open the door to the fire extinguisher thing. You then remove the script, and now I modify the picture that needs to be drawn so the hammer is missing, but now you have the hammer in your inventory. And that's pretty much the simple, and the script is that simple. There was no like complicated things about it. It's basically room, If it's a match, here verb noun. If it's a match, here's the action like print message, award this to inventory. And now anytime you're in this room, use this picture instead of that picture. That's it. Um, but the whole thing was basically, coming up with the jokes, coming up with the entire scenario. Because first thing you do when you design these games, you first do a map saying, okay, here's the island, then here's the 4 rooms here, then here's all the items that we leave here, here's the puzzles we want to do. Then once the person solves this puzzle, then we move them to teleport them to this item here where they now get on a rescue ship, and then they adventure on the ship, and then they go here to the city and blah blah blah. And of course, you have to be cognizant that you can't really do more than like 20 to 50 rooms, because you only have so much space on those floppy disks. So, as much as you'd like to make a game which has like all of London in it so you can explore everything, says, gee, well, now you're going to have at least 5 or 6 artists that are all going to, be drawing paychecks and probably going bananas just drawing the same streets all the time. But and of course, I'm going to say, oh, great, you've got a game here that needs about 7 megabytes of space to store in a day and age in which 5 megabyte hard drives were big. So, 140K per side of a floppy is what you're dealing with. And these games had fit on 2 sides of a floppy.
Did you ever, putting yourself in 16-year-old you's shoes, did you ever think that, did you look forward to, or did you ever believe that games were going to be as big as they are, at least on the removable mediums that they are now, that these big, expansive worlds?
Oh, when we were doing this back in the 80s, we had no idea what we were part of. I mean, when I was creating Mindshot and Trace Ascension, it was a matter of, we need to finish this game by this date, otherwise we run out of money and we're all unemployed. That's what was going through your head. So then you needed to take everything you could, cut every corner you could, get this thing done ASAP. So then when the date came that this game had to be done, it was done. And I was able to handle, here's a floppy disk of the game, send it off to Activision. They can then play test it, verify everything's cool. And if it is, we'll apply copy protection and then duplicate it and sell it in the stores, and hopefully, make us enough money so we can do another game. And Mindshot Trace Ascension sold enough copies that they said, yeah, we want another one. That's when Borrowed Time was born. And then later on, they said, yeah, we want another one. Task Times and Tone Town was born. And then after that, it's like, I think we're done.
But I got 5 more in me.
I did have Stripe. I mean, I have a sequel already designed for Task Times and Tone Town 2, but it's been 30 years and no one's really interested in it. Now, granted, I've been changing it over and over again, because nowadays, a 2D point and click type of adventure done in the Task Time style is not gonna make it this year. I mean, nobody's gonna care
Not
about
unless, and I hate that
but
that's true.
Style game.
But I mean, even, Ken's new adventure, A Cygnus Entertainment, took Colossal Cave Adventure and put it out, in this in particular irritated the hell out of me. So Colossal Cave Adventure comes out. Ken Williams works with, I think it's Dan Crowther, William Crowther, my bad. William Crowther, and takes the idea of Colossal Cave, puts it in the Unity engine, and creates a damn near 1-to-1 version of Colossal Cave for modern audiences. And people shit on it. And the thing is that if you were from the era where Colossal Cave started off saying you're in a field outside of a house, you hear running water, and then, you're going here and you're like, oh, this is just an asset flip. No, that was magical. Those people back then, yourself included, had to paint worlds with words.
Yeah, see, the way I would have done it was that I still would have designed what Ken Williams did. However, I would have also had classic mode, which you could play the game as a text adventure, but with one twist: sound. It would have been just a text adventure, but it says you are now in a field, and now you hear sound effects of birds chirping, the wind rustling, so forth. No, nothing, still nothing visible, but you're hearing the sounds. And then you would have gone to the next room, and you hear the water says, oh, there's a room with a waterfall. You can hear the waterfall. You could, and if there's creatures nearby, I would make the sounds going, and we 3D sound with that.
Oh my gosh, hearing the
And
bird rattle in the cage would have been like,
now
woo.
that's in classic, because you could have actually done that in the 80s. I mean, to put it in perspective, there's nothing stopping me from doing Colossal Cave with that very same feature on an Apple II GS or an Apple II with a soundboard or any PC with a Sound Blaster. I could run this on the standard 4.7 megahertz IBM 5150. As long as I had a Sound Blaster plugged in, the game would run just fine. And it would be either creep you out or would make you, okay, I just gotta leave the game running while I go to bed to have.
Listen to ambient noise. So as
But these,
Interplay got bigger, did you were you kind of thrown off by that in any way? Did you want to go
oh,
back to the small company roots?
oh, I did. And in fact, every company that I did ever since, we never went bigger than 15 people because um, you got to stay focused. That's the first thing. Is that with Interplay, especially when we were in a heyday, we were doing so many projects, nobody knew what was going on, and we were just wasting money here and there because nobody knew what they were doing. Um, and secondly, for me, is something a story I've been telling before, which is when I had the epiphany that Interplay was too big. It was around 1991, 92, give or take. We were around 300-ish people and still growing. I made it a point that anytime somebody I would meet, I would introduce myself, get to know them. So most of the time, people were saying, like, oh, yeah, I just got hired last week. Oh, I just got hired a few days ago. Great. Talk to them. I was walking through an area in marketing that I remember, and I meet up with this guy and I go, oh, hi. I don't remember seeing you. He's like, oh, yeah. I was like, yeah, I've heard of you. Your burger. He says, yeah. Um, so how long are you working here? 1 year. And I'm like, he has been working here for a whole year, and I have never once bumped into him. We're too freaking big. Yeah, when I saw that, and I started realizing how many more people are working here that I've never met. And then I realized like there's this OEM division that I hardly ever interact with. We have this VR Sports that was just founded. We have a bunch of people working there. And of course, marketing, because I rarely ever went to marketing, and that's where this person worked in. But it's like there's all these people here, dozens of people that have been working at Interplay for months, and then, like in this guy's case, years. And there may be people who've been working there even longer. And I've never actually spent the time to say, hi, how are you? And it's like, okay, we're too big.
So and you mentioned like hey, your newer companies or companies that you founded kept that same philosophy. Like Contraband, is that the same thing? We want to keep it small. We want to keep it
Oh yeah,
intimate. I want to know
Contraband was,
everybody. I want to be familiar with
yeah, we were like
everybody.
20 people at our peak. And we did things like Myth 3, The Wolf Age. We did Heroes of Might and Magic 4 with 3DO. We did the Activision Anthology for Activision. And we did all those games with a staff of 20 people.
So I cleared this with you just because I want to address it because I am pansexual, member of the LGBT community. I've
Fair enough.
always been,
Mhm.
love everybody. That's the way I've always been. But I wanted to ask, how did being trans affect your role or how people perceived you in the gaming industry?
I've lost some friends. There are people who I thought for certain would be my friend, but there's like one person who used to work for me that even now, when I try to reach out to him, he will not talk about me. And he had an interview about 2 years ago with another friend of mine and kept dead naming me. And it's like, well,
For anybody who's unfamiliar with that term, dead naming is whenever you name somebody
the previous name.
the previous name that their
Yeah.
previous
And we
identity
do
from
it
before the
intentionally.
transition.
Because it's like one thing's like, yeah, oh yeah, well, Rebecca, no, they don't even use that word. It says, well, the person's, this is their name, this is their business, how I know them, blah, blah, blah. And they never acknowledge their new name and identity. and
It,
that's
it's
and they're
it's
doing it
it's a
intentionally.
malicious thing. It's if you make a mistake and say someone's previous
Oh yeah,
identity and just apologize, move on. But if you dead naming is a very malicious
yeah, and
intent.
that's actually coming from hatred and maliciousness if you detonate someone. Um, and then there were, and of course, there were some business opportunities I've lost because the fact that someone doesn't ever want to. There was even one company who wanted to hire me. I was living in Seattle and they wanted me to relocate to the Bay Area to work for them. It was a company that does mobile games. But they I interviewed, did really, really well, met up with people, including the CEO stuff. They loved me. They gave me a great job offer. I accepted the job offer. I was then preparing to relocate down to the location when I get a message from their HR saying, "We are rescinding your job offer." And go, "What for?" "I'm sorry, but we just decided to go in another direction." It wasn't until years later I met up with a friend of mine who worked at that company who then said, "Oh, yeah, the CEO Googled your name. And then when they found out you were trans, they freaked out." And they then said, "No way in hell." There's another company that did the same thing, in which there was a company that when I was working in Electronic Arts, a lot of my teammates were being recruited by some company in Rhode Island, 38 Studios. And I was a little bummed because, you know, no one at least asked me if I wanted to go. Granted, I probably wouldn't have gone anyways, but it was just, one of the things that would have been nice to at least have been asked. But then it was found out much later that the person who ran that company was a rabid homophobe. So I'm like, well, so twice there was opportunities that had I not been LGBT would have opened, but in an ironic way, both of those opportunities, had I gone that path, would have ended in disaster because both companies
Proof
ended
that
up. Yep.
sticking to your guns and being who you identify and who you want to be, life will work out. It's
Yeah,
I
so
promise.
one company imploded tremendously and screwed over all their employees. The other one turned out to be nothing but everybody who I talked to who worked there said, "Don't ever work here. It's bad."
Well, we'll bring it
So
back onto the positive side as we kind
there
of
you go.
go out. At the end of every one of these, I like to bring up a hypothetical. If somebody, a 16-year-old, is watching this right now and wants to get into designing in a new modern thing, obviously technology is different, the
Oh yeah.
world is different. If
The
you could give
world's
any
different.
advice for somebody who wants to enter game programming and they're at the very start of it, do you have any advice for them in that regard?
This is advice which doesn't change. When I first started out, I had a thirst for knowledge. Books are your friends. Read them. So read the C++. Like I wrote the C book from Kernighan and Ritchie. That's how I started learning how to C. I read the Cinertech 6502 hardware manual, which is how I understand how the 6502 worked. Um, the thirst for knowledge does not end because here today I'm reading the manual on the latest ARM chips to see how the new CPUs are running, so I know what the next gen chips are. You just keep learning and learning. Never ever say, "I don't need to read that because I already know it." That's a sign that you are now set in your ways and that sooner or later, probably sooner, everyone else will pass you by. So that's why when I ever hear other programmers and things, they think they're God's gift to programming and they say, "Oh, I already know everything." It says, "No, you don't. You're already resting on your laurels, and sooner or later, someone's just going to be more clever and eat your shorts." Um, but it's the always be learning and never be satisfied with, "Oh, it works." Ask yourself why. Why does it work? And understand why does it work. Like, "Oh, how video compression. I can use this algorithm." But do you understand it? Do you really know what the data looks like? Learn it, figure it out. There are plenty of books, and if not, GitHub exists, in which pretty much the world knowledge of source code is right there at your fingertips. Some of it's undecipherable because it's not well documented, but then that's what your job's going to be. Read the code, document it, and ask the question over and over again, why?
That's lovely. That's really lovely. That works. Yeah, that's the same thing. I just took a new job fixing basically creating avionics harnesses by following
Mhm.
schematics. And while I've always been avionics by trade, this is it's a class 3 level of electronics work, which, you know, for me, good enough for government work, good enough for me, class 1. But now I'm having to learn something that I believe I knew to the full capacity of my knowledge based on being in the military and working on the avionics for F-16. So it's still refreshing to learn, even though it's not technically continuing education, but basically rewriting everything I've known for all this new knowledge. So
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time
Mhm.
to sit down and
And
talk with me. It has been an absolutely lovely experience listening to your story and hearing your insight on the video game industry. And
hey, so wonderful to spend time with you. Just let me know if you ever want to do this again.
at the end of this interview, I was dumbfounded. It's not very often you get to sit down and speak with people who created companies. Sometimes it's hard to get a hold of them, sometimes they don't want to talk to people. But if you do, you get an amazing insight into how gaming was at the time. Interplay was a big part of so many of our lives. Fallout to this day remains as one of the more interesting RPGs I've played. Some of you even like Bard's Tale. I will say Miss Rebecca kept me on my toes. She's a very smart lady and someone who exudes technological knowledge and a level of love for retro gaming that is tremendously hard to emulate. It was a great time, and I appreciate every second she spent with me.